Yes, my name's John G. Sutton, and welcome to Tales from the Jails. Today I'm going to tell you the story. Well, it's a true story actually, it's not a tall story. It's rather grim, I agree, but this is an absolutely true story, an account of what happened to me when I was at HM Prison Wormwood Scrubs, which is in London West 12. So I was on nights actually. It was in probably around about May, June of 1976, and I was appointed to be the officer in charge of the hostel. Now, the hostel at HMP Wormwood Scrubs, if you look at the front of Wormwood Scrubs, you see the twin towers at the front, the big oak and iron gate, yeah? You know, the towers with the two, the pictures, the relief like motifs of two prison reformers, Elizabeth Fry and John Howard, I believe. Anyway, immediately before that, on the left hand side as you're going into the scrubs, is a big building, and that was used in 1976 as a prison hostel, which is like a halfway house between HMP Wormwood Scrubs. The prisoners, towards the end of their sentence, were allowed to work in London and to reside within the hostel. It was a halfway house between the long-term D wing and society, which where they were going back in. So what the staff were doing there were just supervising them and making sure that they were secure, locking them up at night, not locking them in, but locking them up effectively, because they were still part of the prison establishment, and at the same time keeping their numbers, because they were still part of the numbers for the prison. So it was the duty of the duty officer, i.e. myself, to count all the inmates in the hostel, report them to the principal officer, and in the morning, and secure them all night, make sure they were all right. Basically, you weren't locking them or handcuffing them or anything like that. You were just basically supervising them. And in the morning, immediately before the numbers went, you counted everybody again to ensure that they were there, phoned in your numbers to the principal officer, and that was your duty over. You'd done it. It was a real, what people would consider to be a real doddle of a job. However, they were supposed to be in the hostel by 10 o'clock at night. So it gets to be, I'm on duty this night. It was about May, June of 1976. I'm on duty, and it gets to be about 10:15, and one of the inmates was missing. I thought, well, I'm going to have to ring this in, because they're expecting me to ring my numbers in, and he's not there. So I was about to do that when he appeared, and he was exceedingly inebriated. In other words, three sheets to the wind, colloquially known as being pissed. Yeah, so I said to this guy, I said, listen, you look a bit the worse for wear, sit down here. I said, I'm not going to report you as missing because I've not rung my numbers in yet. I'm going to write it in the book that you came in at 10:15 because that's my duty, but nobody reads the book. Nobody reads it. It's a day book, incident book. I said, nobody bothers looking at that. I said, so you're not going to get hauled over the coals for it. You're not in trouble. All you've got to do is sober yourself up a little bit, go to bed, sleep it off. Happy dreams. I said, and in the meantime, I'll make you a cup of tea. How many sugars? So he says, I'll have 2 sugars. And he says, what a day we've had today. I said, really? She said, I'm going to tell you a story. So he started to tell me a strange tale. Listen, this is the honest truth. I'm going to tell you in the style that he told me, I'm not an impressionist. I'm not. Anyway, I'm going to do it in his style. He says, yeah, it was bad. We got them upstairs. We went in the shop. We've got them in the back. We locked them up. We tied them up. We ransacked the place. We got the money out. Absolutely brilliant. They thought we were police officers and all. So I thought, this guy's living in the past. I knew from the notes that he was an armed robber. But he was coming towards the end. I think it was an 8-year sentence or a 9-year sentence, something like that. He was in the final 12 months, and hence he was in the hostel trying to be integrated back into society. So I listened to what he got to say. He drank his tea, went to bed. I thought nothing more about it, phoned my numbers in, and settled down for a quiet evening reading a book. At the time I was studying sociology at one of the colleges from London University, reading about Captain Swing and the Luddites and the movement against mechanisation in the farming industry. Anyway, thought nothing more about it. Came the morning, counted everybody up, everybody was there, phoned my numbers in, 7 o'clock, handed over to the next officer, got my coat on, and it was Sunday morning. I remember it quite clearly. Sunday morning, and as I was walking home, I passed a newspaper shop, went in and got myself a copy of the Sunday Mirror. It was definitely the Sunday Mirror, I remember it, and the headline was "Armed Robbery in West End." I thought, I fancied that, armed robbery in the West End. So I didn't think anything about it. Got home, sat down, having my breakfast. Dear wife Mary, made me some breakfast, usual stuff, couple of sausages and egg, and at the time I could eat. Can't eat now. Anyway, I'm reading this story at the same time, and the story was exactly the same as this crazy drunk prisoner had told me the night before, except he'd told me this story about 10:30 at night. Now the papers are not printed until round about, I don't know, midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, so it wasn't possible that he'd read the story, and he couldn't have done anyway because he was in bed fast asleep in a drunken slumber. So at the bottom of the account it said, anyone with any information, ring West End Central CID. In other words, the Sweeny. Yeah. So I said to my wife, this guy from the hostel's been in, and told me all about this, and here it is in the paper, they're asking for information. Now, I knew the security officer, the head of security at Wormwood Scrubs, and I considered him to be a complete knobhead. I had previously reported to him incidents that I considered to be a danger to the establishment, and he'd effectively told me to get on with my business, go and have a cup of tea, go and have some coffee or whatever, leave it alone, you don't need to worry about that. Really? I didn't need to worry about it? No? Well, what happened then was he ignored my advice, ignored my observations, and the rioters ended up on the roof of the Scrubs. Anyway, that's another story. So I had absolutely no faith in the head of security for Wormwood Scrubs, none at all. I wouldn't trust him to walk my dog round the pond. I thought he was a complete knob. So there was no point in me reporting anything to him because he would just ignore it. So I went out to a telephone box, standard nice red telephone box, I like them. It went in, I phoned the number, because we didn't have a phone in the house. It was a masonette, Anyway, I phoned the number for West End Central CID, got through to them, told them my story, and they said, this is very interesting, we're sending somebody around to see you. We'll be there in half an hour. So I went back told them where I lived, of course, went back to my home, my little masonette, which was Bromyard Avenue, by the way. In case anybody's wondering, that's where I lived, on Bromyard Avenue in East Acton. Yeah. Anyway, so the West End Central CID arrived. They said, right, let's talk us through this. Yeah, so I told them the story about I was the officer in charge of the hostel, and he came in drunk and told me this story about holding this shop up and how they ordered them into the back. And I gave them the details, as to what he'd said. They'd tied them up, put them in the back room, pretended to be policemen, and all this, that, and the other. He said, that's exactly what happened. He said, it's not in the paper that they pretended to be policemen, but that's what they did. He said, now we want you to come with us now. And they took me in the police car, blue lights flashing, to Ealing Central Police Station. Ealing Central, yeah. So I was taken from there and into another interview room. In came this guy, said, I'm Detective Chief Inspector such and such a body of, I think it was the Flying Squad or something. He said, but he said, I'm going to interview you now, and I want you to start right at the beginning and tell me everything exactly as it happened. Same story? Absolutely. I mean, I was telling the truth, you know. He said, this is extremely interesting. We believe that the hostel at Wormwood Scrubs is being used as a base for armed robberies. He said, and we are going to raid at the hostel. He said, you are a prison officer. We want you to ring the governor and tell him that we're on the way. Well, come on. I mean, I had to do it, you know, so they give me the phone, and sure enough, I got through to the security department. I said, it's prison officer Sutton here. I said, I need to speak to the governor immediately. I'm with the police at Ealing Police Station. Oh, you can't speak to the governor, he's on his round. I said, listen, this is extremely serious. Standing next to me is Chief Inspector such and such a body of West End Central CID, the flying squad. We've got to come in and we need to see the governor. I must speak to him immediately. Eventually I got through to the governor, whose name I will not repeat, but it was Norman Honey. And anyway, I got through to him, and he said, when I spoke to him, I told him exactly what was happening. He said, I do not believe you. I said, I am now handing the telephone over to Detective Chief Inspector, whatever his name was, and I said, he will explain to you exactly what is going to happen. So I handed the phone to this Chief Inspector, and he told the Chief Inspector, he said, I do not believe you. So the Chief Inspector said, right, get your security officer to ring up the telephone exchange, get them to connect you direct to Ealing Police Station and ask for Chief Inspector such and such a body. He said, and that will prove to you who I am, and we are coming in to raid the prison hostel. Yeah, that was it, you know. It was half an hour later the telephone rang in the police station to speak to the CID Chief Inspector, and he said to me, right, we're on, we're going. So out we went, and they were all tooled up, these lads, you know. They had guns, everything, and plain police cars, but they had blue lights on the top, and flying through London with the flying squad. We arrive at Wormwood Scrubs, which is not a million miles away from Ealing. Let me tell you, that's about 3 miles, 4 miles. So we arrive at the hostel at Wormwood Scrubs, straight in, and standing outside the hostel was the head of security for HM Prison Wormwood Scrubs. And I jumped out the car, the Chief Inspector jumps out the car, and the Chief Inspector says to him, right, open the hostel up, we're going through it. And this principal officer, who was the head of security for Wormwood Scrubs, said, oh, and he said, I'm very sorry to advise you, he said, but this is a prison department property, and you may not search prison department properties unless the inmates are present, and there are no inmates present in the hostel at the moment. I said, what? No inmates present in the hostel? It's about 11:15 in the morning on a Sunday morning, and you're saying there's no inmates in? Oh no, they've all checked out. So the Chief Inspector said to this principal officer, he said, what is your name? And he gave him his name. He said, well, listen, if you don't step out of my way and allow us into the hostel to search it, as we are going to do, I will arrest you for obstructing the police, and you'll be in the back of that van on your way to Ealing Central Police Station, where you'll remain in the cells until I deem it right to see you. Now get out of my way. And he said to me, John, will you open the front door? Well, they'd locked it up. I said, yeah, I know how to open the front door. So I took a flying run at it, booted the door, and it smashed open. The look on this principal officer's face, and we all steamed in, and there were no inmates. All the inmates, and there were about 15 of them, had all been booked out. They'd been booked out from when I made that telephone call to the governor of Wormwood Scrubs to us arriving, and they searched the hostel. They didn't find any inmates, and the inmate that had told me all about how he raided this place in the West End and ordered them into the back, I tell you what it's called, Jean Junction. You can look it up, yeah. Gene Junction, armed robbery on the Gene Junction, yeah. And they went through the thing, and then we got to their lockers, and they said, "How do we open the lockers?" I said, "Well, same way I opened the front door." Boosh! Smashed all the lockers open, and they went through the lockers, and they found inside this guy's locker, you know, false ID cards, you know, where he'd been, and the clothing that was described by the people in the Gene Junction was in his locker, along with false police identity cards. He said, "We've definitely, this guy's definitely done it," but he said he's been checked out. So the head of security for Wormwood Scrubs had cleared the hostel out, said, "You better get out, lads," or whatever it is. You know, the police are coming. Imagine that. Yeah. No, the police said to me, "Yeah, brilliant, John. You know, absolutely, we're sure that this is right. But we can't get him. He's gone." And he had gone. And they didn't find him. And they had CID officers outside the hostel waiting for him to come back. He never came back. Months and months passed, and I'd got moved from Wormwood Scrubs then, and I was back at Strangeways, and I was in Strangeways, and I got a telephone call, and said, "You better come to the office." You know, I had to go from where I was to the office. It was a telephone call from London, and it was West End Central CID, and they said, "We've just arrested a man, and he's confessed to the armed robbery at the Gene Junction," and he was, at the time of that arrest, a resident at Wormwood Scrubs in the hostel. He said, "And we found your statement," and he is pleading guilty to this, but in the event that he changes his plea to not guilty, would you come to London and give evidence against him? I said, "Absolutely." I said, "I can remember the incident perfectly well." They said, "Well, we've got your statement. You're absolutely right. Everything you said is correct. He did it with a group of other people, pretending to be police officers." He said, "All the evidence that we discovered on that day has been kept." He said, "And we've got him banged to rights." And they said, "We're putting you forward for a commendation for your actions." Except, yeah, you'd think that would be all right, wouldn't you? John getting a commendation from the police. No, that's not what happened. I got called up to the governor and warned that in the event that I ever contacted anybody outside of the prison service for incidents that happened within the prison service again, then my employment would be terminated. The chief inspector who was in charge that day actually contacted me and said, "John, get out of that mob. They're a bunch of idiots." He said, "Get out, come and work for the CID." He said, "I guarantee you get through. You'll get through." He said, "I'll make sure you get through." He said, "And you'll be with the Sweeny. You'll be with the flying squad." And I would have been, but I'm colourblind. I can't pass the medical. I'd tried, you know, because my dad was an officer, an inspector in the CID. My brother was a CID inspector. But I'm colourblind. There you go. Tales from the jails. Would you believe it?